we are going across the subtopic industrial capitalism or industrial phase of colonialism in India. And earlier you have followed a diagram, you may recall, and here we are just going across this subtopic. We have already entered into, you can say, the second one subpart of the part number second one. This is the second one subpart of the part number second one, Because for the sake of your convenience, we have divided modern history in 4 parts. First part was the history of 18th century. The second part is colonialism. Even colonialism should be divided into 3 subparts. The first subpart was mercantile phase of colonialism. The second one part is industrial phase of colonialism. Presently, we are just going across the subtopic. This is industrial phase of colonialism, because it was the time there was a rise of industrial capitalism in Britain. So as a colony was supposed to be subservient to the basic interest of the metropolitan state or the mother state, so in order to fulfill the need of industrial capitalism of Britain, there was the major policy shift towards India, and India had to be enabled for promoting the industrial capitalist interest of London. So that's why it was characterized as industrial phase of capitalism. So the industrial phase of, you can say, colonialism. I have told you earlier that Marx has divided earlier the phase of colonialism in 2 parts, the monopoly capitalism and the free trade. So my student, this is the era of free trade according to in Marxian term. Monopoly capitalism in Marxian term was mercantile phase of capitalism. And what you know as free trade phase, so free trade phase in the lofty words of Marx, so this term was applied for this phase. But who has just changed the nomenclature to mercantile, industrial and financial, So actually Rajni Pamdat, he was an Indian Marxist and he followed Lenin. So Lenin make an addition of the specific phase of capitalism, and that is called financial phase of capitalism. So accordingly and following the formula of Lenin has made the further, interpretation of Marxism according to the changing need of time. So, so following the Lenin's method as well, then Rajni Pamdat divided it in 3 phases: mercantile, industrial and financial phase. We are presently going across this industrial phase. Now you will observe in mercantile phase, as the British policy towards India was guided by the mercantile capitalist interest. So Britain was not in need to making any specific, you can say, overhauling of Indian structure. And in some total, traditional structure was maintained with certain modifications everywhere. But now you can say, as you have entered into industrial phase, you will come to realize that then the almost a major metamorphosis of the existing structure of India. So later we will make a calculation what proved more damaging to India, whether the mercantile phase of British capitalism or industrial phase of British capitalism. And it is not simply applicable in case of India, but almost in whole of the world, and different colonial powers just followed the more or less the same path. So here we are making a study of India, and here the first one subtopic is political policy. Because you already recalling the definition, I think I am just repeating the things time and again, so that the basic essence of the change should be planted in your mind. Because if the basic essence you are clear, then informations are not a difficulty for you. Because in interpretation, you can say informations are just the examples of interpretations. So in course of interpreting the things, you will just recall or recollect the sufficient number of examples which you can use here and there time and again. So that will not create a major problem for you, if your analysis part is clear. So that's why I have followed the method of this diagram. And here firstly you are specifying the objective. What was the objective? Objective is to convert India as a market for British manufactured goods and the supplier of raw materials. So it affected the British political policy. What was the specific British political policy? Now in the previous year, the governor generals or the administrators in India tried to avoid the war and annexation as much as possible, but still they were compelled to fight the war and to carry the annexation further on in order to fulfill the mercantile needs of the time. But now in industrial phase, out and out, the company's role was going to undergo a major change, a major shift now. And the company became the administrator of India. Court of directors, you can say, basically the British Parliament expected from the company something else. In place of reducing your mercantile role, you have to play the major role in administration and you have to enable the capitalist, British industrial capitalism, interest of British capitalism, British industrial capitalism in India. So company's role was undergoing a phase of major metamorphosis. So that affected its political policy. Now it was imperative for the British company to bring more and more Indian states under the direct British control so that the British manufactured goods could have, as well as the British Indian raw materials could have, you can say, have to used in reverse direction. Means ki on the one hand, the Indian market had to absorb the British manufactured goods and provide the raw materials. And it was possible if more and more regions would be under the direct control. And it is due to this fact, almost all governor generals, starting from Lord Hastings up to Lord Dalhousie, just followed the policy of unrestricted expansion. So in the previous class, my students, in studies class, we have already discussed this aspect. The first one was the role of, Lord Hastings, the major wars, then Amherst. After Amherst, William Bentinck annexation, then we have discussed about Auckland and then Ellenborough. Then we have reached even up to Hardig and talked about the Anglo-Sikh War. But before that, I have to make you familiar with Sikhs, who were Sikhs and what was their specific structure. Because in medieval history, you have already made a study of Sikhs, and also you have been informed in the early modern phase how was formation of a Sikh state under different sardars now, and that was called, they were compiled and they were just organized under the missals. But later, among the 12 missals, it would be the Sukarchakya missal led by Ranjit Singh, which would, you can say, make a major stride, and it would just start the empire building in northwest. And while subduing other nobles and sardars, it expanded, and Ranjit Singh created a powerful Sikh state which could have been a rival to the British but could not have been, because Ranjit Singh has followed the very different type of policy towards the British.